Hello and welcome back to the Import Export Hub channel, everybody. Boring Bogdan here, your host for the next couple of minutes. Thanks for joining in. And guys, without asking you to hit those small buttons below this video, let's dive into today's topic, in which I will try to cover the imports and the exports of Portugal, the man, joking, the country, not the band, where Cristiano Ronaldo was born, the former global maritime power of the 15th and 16th centuries. A country that now has roughly more or less 10 million inhabitants, which is considered a developed country, has a GDP of roughly $350 billion, with three quarters of this GDP driven mainly by the services sector. And I don't know, the last thing that I want to say about Portugal is about the logistics performance index, which puts Portugal on the 38th spot overall, with low points unfortunately in terms of infrastructure, and it seems that they are lagging a little bit here in this sector. So guys, these are a couple of facts about Portugal, and now allow me to dive into my boring data here. And by the way, I have the data for 2022, as you can see here, so quite fresh, let's say. And as usual, I will start with the overall exports and imports, highlighting the top 10 industries, chapters rather, as we can find different chapters belonging more or less to the same industry, let's say. And then I will take the top 5 chapters from each flow in order to see also who are the main trading partners for Portugal. So guys, in terms of the overall exports, Portugal managed to export some $84.45 billion worth of goods. Remember, we are talking about the exports and the imports of goods here, up 9.6% from 2021, with chapter 87, 27 and 85 as the main drivers. But as you can see here, there are others like, I don't know, 84 or 39, so plastics and articles thereof. We have furniture, so chapter 94, sorry, and the top 10 ends with chapter 64, so footwear, with almost $2.2 billion worth of exports. In what concerns the year-on-year changes, and limiting this analysis at the top 10 chapters, the mineral fuels and the oils chapter had the biggest positive change, both in absolute and relative terms. It seems that 2022 was indeed a very, very good year for the commodity trading world, not just petroleum, but also grains, for example. I see also that chapter 85 and 48 had strong results, while on the other side of the spectrum, if you want, we have two chapters who contracted, chapter 84 and 61, the former with 1.6% and the latter with 2.6%. While in terms of cumulative value for the top 10 chapters, we have almost 55%, which is pretty good. And guys, now that I've showed you the overall exports, let's take a look at the import side as well. And as you can see here, the top 3 chapters are in a different order. A lot of intra-chapter activity, which is again a good sign. And basically chapter 27 is the main driver here when it comes to Portugal's imports. It's followed by chapter 85, while the third spot is taken by the vehicles chapters, so chapter 87, and the rest of them cover a variety of industries, if you want, from, I don't know, machinery or plastics to pharmaceutical or chemical products. And overall, Portugal managed to import some $115 billion worth of goods, almost 17% more than in 2021, with the mineral fuels and oils chapter again having the biggest change, both in absolute and relative terms. While on the other hand, the chapter 84 and also chapter 38 managed to shrink in terms of imports with 4.7% and 1.9% respectively, while in terms of the balance of trade, we have here some $32.5 billion negative balance of trade, so basically more imports than exports, with all the top 10 import chapters on the red, more than a third from this deficit coming from the mineral fuels and oils chapter, some $12.2 billion negative trade balance. And now, guys, with both the overall flows being covered, so imports and exports, I'll move to the top 5 chapters from each flow to see also the trading partners. And I will start with chapter 87 from the export flow. So we're talking here about vehicles mostly. A chapter that in 2022 grew with some 1.9% in relative terms and almost $181 million in absolute ones. And we see that Spain, Germany, and France are the main partners, followed by others like, I don't know, Italy, the United Kingdom, or Belgium, to name a couple from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year changes, as I've said, overall there is a positive change, small, but there is. But there are some big contractions in relation with Spain and France. Almost $285 million fewer exports relative to 2022. But on the other hand, there are strong positive changes coming from, I don't know, Germany, Italy, or Turkey, or Turkey, all with figures above the $70 million mark. As for the main drivers here from this chapter, well, towards Spain we have heading 8708, so we're talking about parts and accessories for tractors or, I don't know, for vehicles for the transport of 10 or more persons. While towards Turkey we have heading 8703, so vehicles for the transport of persons. Moving now, guys, to Portugal's second biggest export driver. In terms of value, at least, we have here chapter 27, mineral fuels and oils, who in 2022 saw 60% growth in relative terms and some $2.6 billion in absolute ones, with ships, stores, and bunkers here, Spain and the US as the main destinations. But we have others like, I don't know, Gibraltar, France, or Belgium. Again, to name just a few from this top 10 list. And in what concerns the year-on-year changes, year-on-year dynamics, if you want, except Belgium here, who had a 37% contraction, with the rest of the top 10 partners, we have positive changes. The largest ones being in relation with Spain, the United States, the United Kingdom, and also the Netherlands, all with figures above the $200 million mark. While in what concerns the main drivers here, for both ship stores or bunkers and the Netherlands, we have the same heading, so 27010, so petroleum oils. Moving now to Portugal's third largest export driver. Here we have chapter 85. Electrical machinery and parts thereof, with $6.6 billion worth of exports in 2022, some 13% more than in 2021, with Germany here, Spain, and France as the main trading partners. But of course, we have other important ones in this top 10 list, like, I don't know, the United States, Belgium, or the Czech Republic. Again, to mention just a couple. We see that in 2022, the exports towards Germany and the United Kingdom shrunk with almost $31 and $41 million respectively. But overall, we see almost $783 million expansion, so quite good if you ask me. While in terms of the main drivers from this chapter, we have here heading 8527 towards Germany and heading 8544 towards the United Kingdom. So we're talking about insulated wires and other insulated electric conductors. Jumping now, guys, to Portugal's fourth export driver, we have here chapter 84, machinery and mechanical appliances, which in 2022 had a contraction, unfortunately, some $80 million. And we see again the same old partners like, I don't know, Spain, Germany, or France, again as the main destinations. But we have others like, I don't know, Angola, Poland, or Sweden from this top 10 list. And as I've said previously, the overall exports from this chapter shrunk, mainly because Spain, Germany, and France had lower requests. Most probably, even though we see nice figures coming from, I don't know, Angola or the United States. In what concerns the main drivers from this chapter, heading 8431 drove most of Portugal's exports in 2022 towards Angola, while towards Sweden, the main export driver was heading 8412. So we're talking here about engines and motors and parts thereof. And with this being said, I'll move now to the fifth and the last chapter that I will cover from the export flow. And we have here chapter 39, plastics and articles thereof, who in 2022 saw a 3% positive change, some $122 million if we are talking in absolute terms, which brings the overall exports from this chapter to around $4.3 billion, with Spain as the main destination, which was followed by France, and then we have Germany on the third spot, while the top 10 list is completed by countries like, I don't know, Italy, the United Kingdom, or Morocco, again to name a couple. In terms of year-on-year dynamics, there are only two countries in this top 10 list who had contractions, so Belgium and the United Kingdom, with 8.1 and almost $22 million respectively. But on the other side, we have strong positive changes in relation with France and the Netherlands, both with figures above the $30 million mark. And guys, speaking of France, we see that Portugal's main export driver from this chapter was heading 3920. So we're talking about plates, sheets, film, foil, and strip of non-cellular plastics, while towards Morocco we have polymers of vinyl chloride. So we're talking here about heading 3904. And finally, guys, with the top 5 export drivers being covered, let's move on to the import flow and see Portugal's trading partners. And the first chapter is 27, mineral fuels and oils, with almost $19.2 billion worth of imports for 2022, with Spain here, Brazil, and the United States as the main partners, which were followed by other traditional petroleum exporters like, I don't know, Nigeria, Algeria, or Angola. And overall, 2022 saw a 71% increase relative to 2021, almost $8 billion more imports, with only one country here in this top 10 list registering a contraction, which is Russia. It's very interesting to see how the figures in 2023 would look like. But anyways, we see here that Spain and the United States saw their exports towards Portugal increase with $2 and $1 billion respectively. Trinidad and Tobago's exports skyrocketed as well in 2022, but I think here is just an one-off opportunity. Anyways, I don't want to get into the details. I'm not an expert here, and I will move to the main drivers, which are not that complex. And we have here for both Brazil and Azerbaijan the same heading. So 2709, we're talking about crude petroleum. And guys, I will now move to the second chapter that drove Portugal's imports for 2022. We have here chapter 85 with almost $11 billion worth of imports, some 16% more in relative terms, and $1.5 billion in absolute ones, with Germany here, Spain, and China as the main partners, which were followed by countries like, I don't know, France, Taiwan, or Singapore, again, to name just a few from this top 10 list. Now, in what concerns the year-on-year changes, we have only two countries from this top 10 list who registered the contraction, so France and Poland. But on the other side, we have some very, very nice figures coming from China, who basically increased its exports towards Portugal with almost 50% relative to 2021. Confirming the upward trend from the last couple of years, and personally I think that things won't stop here, and from the research I've done from my sources, half of that amount was driven by the imports of assembled photovoltaic cells. Here we have in place a green energy transition strategy, if you want, so things could look really, really good for China and Portugal, of course, if the European Union doesn't stick its nose too much. So we will see, and what's going to happen in the next couple of years. But anyways, coming back to my so-called analysis, we see that from France, the second example here, the main driver was heading 8542, so we're talking about electronic integrated circuits, especially parts thereof. Jumping now to the third import driver for Portugal, we have here chapter 87, so vehicles, with some $10.7 billion worth of imports for 2022. Which represents 15% more than the previous year, with Spain, Germany, and France as the main partners, which were followed by others like, I don't know, Belgium, China, or Japan. To mention again just a few from this top 10 list, we see that all the top 10 partners were on the green, so basically their exports towards Portugal increased relative to 2021. The biggest absolute positive change happening in relation with Germany, some $525 million. And in what concerns the main drivers from this chapter, from Belgium we have heading 8703, so light vehicles, while from Turkey we have larger vehicles for the transport of 10 or more passengers, including here the driver. Now I will move to Portugal's fourth largest import driver in 2022, which was chapter 84, so machinery and mechanical appliances, with some $8.4 billion, down 5% relative to 2021, some $418 million in absolute terms, with big contractions happening in relation with Portugal's biggest and oldest tradition partners, and I'm talking here about Spain, Germany, Italy, China, and the Netherlands. While in relation with, I don't know, France, Belgium, the Czech Republic, and also Hungary, we see some expansions, but let's face it, there weren't enough to dampen the overall contraction. So after an expansion in 2021, we see a contraction in 2022. Pretty volatile the situation for Portugal in what concerns this chapter, if you ask me. While in terms of the main drivers, well, from Spain the main one was heading 8471, while from Poland we have here heading 8408. So we're talking about diesel or semi-diesel engines. Most probably, guys, for the Stellantis assembly plant in Mangualde, if I remember correctly, where light vans are assembled. Anyways, with this being said and covered as well, let's move to the fifth and last chapter that I will cover. Bear with me a little bit more, guys, as we have here chapter 39. I'll be very, very brief, I promise you, and we're talking about plastics and articles thereof, with some $5.5 billion worth of imports for 2022, some 6% more in relative terms, and some $300 million in absolute ones, with Spain, Germany, and the Netherlands as the main partners, which were followed by others like Italy, South Korea, or Saudi Arabia, for example, again to mention a couple from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year dynamics from this top 10 list, we have just two countries who registered the contraction, so the Netherlands and Belgium, while the rest of them had positive changes. The largest one, in absolute terms at least, happening in relation with Spain, who increased its exports towards Portugal with almost $95 million relative to 2021. But nice numbers come also from South Korea and the United States as well, both with figures above the $30 million mark. As for the main import drivers, hold on guys, from Germany we have heading 3907, so polycetals, polycarbonates, and so on, while from South Korea we have here heading 3902. So we're talking about polymers of propylene or of other olefins in primary forms. And guys, with this last chapter being also covered, that's it for today. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to hit whatever button you like above or below this video. And as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.